Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Rochelle from Rochelle Handmade Designs, and in this video we are doing a sew along for the second part of the dress series, or the second dress in the dress series. Really, that's what it is. It's this dress right here, which is McCall's 8212, which is the raglan sleeve dress. Now before we get started, go ahead and hit the like button and the subscribe button, and also turn on the notification bell so you're notified every time I upload a new video. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get right on into this tutorial. All right, so let's go ahead and get into the next tutorial that I am doing. This is also part of the dress series. This is the second dress in the dress series, which is the raglan sleeve dress, utilizing McCall's 8212, which is this pattern right here. So let's go ahead and talk about the supplies that you need in order to construct this dress. The first thing that you would need is, of course, your pattern. I am doing McCall's 8212. Now I am doing view A, but I am utilizing the sleeves from view B and C, the long sleeve instead of the short sleeves. So if you want to do the short sleeve, just follow along in the instructions to view A, but I will be doing view B for my sleeve, okay? So you will, of course, need the instructions as well. Now, the couple of supplies that you would need is, of course, pens. You guys know that I love my pens. I also use, of course, my marking tools. I have a pencil because I did make an adjustment to my pattern, a pen as well, your disappearing fabric marker, and that's basically to mark my dots. I also have a white pencil, and that's because some portions of my fabric are dark, so I want to be able to see that when I start sewing things together. And then I also have my seam ripper, just in case I make a mistake and need to rip a seam out. I have my thread clippers for the sewing machine. I have point turners here. So I keep one on the table and one at my sewing machine. I also have scissors, one for paper, one for fabric. I never mix the two there. And then you guys know that I cut with rotary cutters, one for paper, one for fabric. I never mix the two there. Now, the only notion that you will need for this pattern outside of your coordinating thread is your elastic, and you need 3/8 of an inch elastic if you're doing view B, which is the casing around your sleeve. So right around here, you will be putting elastic on if you're doing view B or C for the sleeves. If you are doing view A, you do not have any notions outside of the thread. Now that I covered all the tools and supplies that you need in order to construct this pattern, McCall's 8212, let's go ahead and get into the instructions. All right, so let's go ahead and get into the pattern instructions from McCall 8212. So right here shows the pattern pieces you will need. Like I said, I will be cutting view A. So pattern piece number 1, 3, 5, 4, 5, 7, and 8. And I'm also doing the belt, so I'll need pattern piece number 9, which I will cover that here shortly when I show you the pattern pieces. Also, just make note that pattern piece number 1 needs to be with the pattern piece face down on the fabric, and then you're going to cut around. So looking at the instructions, make sure you familiarize yourself with the pattern markings, as well as the cutting and marking over here as well. The difference between the right side, wrong side of your pattern, as well as your fabric. And then you also need to look at the glossary and terms right here. You need to familiarize yourself with what is edge stitching, gathering, narrow hem, reinforcing, stay stitch, slip stitch, top stitching, and under stitching. I would highly suggest, if you have never done any of those things outside of this sew along, make sure you read what those means. Now, the sewing is 5/8 of an inch seam allowance for everything. So basically I will disclose all of that while we're doing our sew along. So For this sew along, we will go through the steps that we will take. I will be doing step 1, which is applying interfacing. I do that before I even start. I will do number 2, which is the front and the back. Skip down to number 4, which is the front bands. I will put that on in 4 and 5 and attach it in 6 and 7 and edge stitch. On step number 8, I will go ahead and lap them over and sew them together. Step number 9, I will insert my pockets. I will skip over step 10 and go to step 11 and sew my side seams, as well as finish off my pockets in step number 12. Now, step number 13 says to form your tucks. However, because I am removing 4 inches from the bottom, I am only doing 1 tuck instead of the 2 tucks that it has there on the pattern, okay? I'll also finish with my sleeves. Now, I know I highlighted 14 and 15, but I'm not doing 14 and 15. I will be going down to 16, 17, 18, and 19 because I decided that I want the longer sleeve with the casing. All right, so I'll attach my sleeve in step number 20, gather the neck edge in 21, apply my neck facing and my neck band in 22 through 25, and slip stitch or edge stitch in 26 and 27 and create that hem. All right, and the creating the hem on step number 28 is for the hem of your dress. All right, and then the last thing I will do is go ahead and do my belt, which is view D, and that's steps 1 through 3. Now I will be creating my hat, but I will not be doing the sew along for the hat. So now that is the instructions. Now that I talked about the instructions and walked you through the steps that I will take to create this dress, let's go ahead and get into the pattern pieces you will need in order to construct this dress. All right, so let's go ahead and get into the pattern pieces you will need in order to construct this dress. First pattern piece is pattern piece number 1, which is your front. Now I cut a side small for mine, cut whatever size that you need, but this is the front pattern piece number 1. And you are going to cut 1 unfold of fabric, all right? And one thing I wanna mention is this line right here where it says stitching, you're going to cut that line and stop right here, but the rest of it you will have on the fold. And you will see that once we start sewing, all right? The next pattern piece is pattern piece number 5, which is your back. You need to cut 1 on the fold. The whole entire front will be cut on the fold of the fabric. Next pattern piece is pattern piece number 7, which is your sleeve. You need to cut 2 of fabric. Pattern piece number 3, which is your front band. You need to cut 2 of fabric and also interface both of those pieces. So interface 2. Pattern piece number 8, which is your neck band. You need to cut 2 on fold of fabric and interface 1 on fold of fabric. Next one is pattern piece number 4, which is your pockets. You need to cut 4 of fabric. If you are doing the belt, you need to cut piece number 9 and cut 2 of fabric. Now, if you know me by now, you know I like belt loops for my belts. So I also created I am going to create belt loops. And once again, it's in like 2 or 3 tutorials now. The belt loop is 6 inches in length and 1.5 inches wide. You only need to cut 1 of fabric for this belt loop. This is what it looks like. 6 inches long, 1.5 inches high, and you're just gonna cut 1. Now that's all the pattern pieces you will need in order to create the dress, which is view A with the sleeves of view B and C. So let's go ahead and get right on into the sewing. All right, so let's go ahead and get into the sewing. So the first thing you need to do is go ahead and grab pattern piece number 1. And this is your front pattern piece. And now what I'm gonna do is I'm going to make a 1-inch line from this dot that you have right here. So you wanna make it about 1 inch above and below, okay? And what you're going to do is stay stitch. And when you stay stitch, you basically want to stay stitch across and go up about 1 inch, 3/8 of an inch right here. Now what I'm gonna do is just create 3/8 of an inch all the way down and then go across, meeting at that dot right here. And then I'm going to clip into my corners. So go ahead to the sewing machine and do that now. All right, so now I have this area right here by the dot reinforced. So now what I'm going to do is clip to that line. Now you don't want to clip through your stitching, you want to clip to that dot, okay? So just make sure that you clip to the dot. I'm gonna turn mine so I'm able to clip without going too far into my dot. Okay? So you should have like this little triangle right here, okay? See if I can show you this. You should have a little triangle right here. Now that you have done that, go ahead and move your front piece to the side, all right? And grab pattern piece number 3. So this is pattern piece number 3, which is your front band right here, okay? Now what you're going to do is, I have already done this, so I'm just gonna tell you exactly what to do. Now on the long edges of your front band, which is one side, now what I'm going to do is put it like it shows in the pattern instructions, okay? So just like this, okay? So you want to have the wrong side of your front band up so you could see this, and you're going to press up 3/8 of an inch seam allowance on both sides. And the reason why is because when you attach it, you're going to be sewing this portion right here. So if you happen to sew 3/8 of an inch on this side and then 3/8 of an inch on this side, when you go to attach it to your front, then you know you're going to have to redo it. So make sure you have the wrong side facing up and create a 3/8 of an inch basting stitch and then press to that line. Now that I show you that, go ahead and grab pattern piece number 1, which is your front. And what we're going to do is pin it with right sides together. So let me make sure I have the right side of my front up, okay? This is the right side. And then what you're going to do is pin, making sure you match up your dots and stop at that dot right here, okay? So this is the wrong way. Make sure that this edge right here is up towards the top portion of your garment, okay? So I'm going to make sure that my dot stops at this dot right here. And I'm gonna pin there. And I'm gonna pin all the way up the top portion of my dress, okay? And then just pin all the way, just pin the raw edges together. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that you have this side done, go ahead and do the other side as well. All right, so now that I have both of my front bands pinned to my front using 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, you're going to start at the beginning. So basically you go start at the top, come all the way down and stop at that dot. Do not go past that dot. You're going to back stitch at the beginning and at the end. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have my front bands attached to my front, what I'm going to do is trim my seams down just a little bit to about 1/4 of an inch. I'm not taking much off. I'm just taking a little bit off on both sides. And then I'm going to go to the ironing station where I'm set up to iron. I'm going to press my seam towards my, towards the front, okay? So now that I have that trimmed down, I'm gonna press my seams towards the front. So basically what I'm going to do is press my seams. Let me show you this. So you're going to press your seams towards the actual dress. Instead of up this way, you're gonna press it towards the dress. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so I wanna make a quick correction to the pattern instructions. And you may want to grab a quick pen to correct this, but on the instruction for number 5, it says press seam towards front, which means towards your dress. I did not do that. I pressed my seams up towards my front band because it looks really weird to have it pressed towards your dress instead of up towards your front band. So I press my seams towards my front band instead of down towards my dress, okay? And then after I did that, where that finished edge is, I made sure that it went a little past the stitching line that I made at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Hope you can see this right here. And then what I'm going to do is pin on the right side because I'm gonna have to edge stitch. So I'm going to pin on the right side. And then you're going to pin all the way down to the dots that you have on the right side. So go ahead and pin that front band down now. All right, so now that I have my front bands pinned down, what you're going to do is baste across at about 1/4 of an inch seam allowance just to keep that in place. You're just gonna baste across those two front at the neck edge. You're gonna baste across there about 1/4 of an inch just to keep that in place. And then you're going to edge stitch right on top of the front band. You can slip stitch if you would like, but I'm just gonna edge stitch the band seams. And what you're going to do is you're going to end at this dot. So go ahead and edge stitch your front bands now. All right, so now that I went ahead and basted across the neck edge of my front, I went ahead and edge stitch on my front band. So the next thing that you need to do is go ahead and look and flip your top portion down to where the wrong side is up, okay? And the next thing you want to do is you're going to go ahead and you're going to lap the lower ends of the bands together, and you're going to pin that triangle end of the front. So basically where you see this triangle, you're gonna pin all of that together. So basically you're just gonna lap this right side over the left side. Make sure those dots are matching up as well, and pin. Make sure everything underneath is flat to where you don't have any puckers either. So I'm going to pin right here. So basically what you're going to do is go to the sewing machine and stitch across where you have the dots right here, and then stitch again 1/4 of an inch away from that line and then trim off the bottom. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I went ahead and closed off my band by lapping the right over the left, I stitched in between the dot, and then I stitched again 1/4 of an inch away. So what I'm gonna do is go ahead and trim this down to about 1/4 of an inch. All right. Now you can go to the serger and serge that so you can have a clean finish. I'll do that here shortly. Now the next thing you're going to do is you're going to go ahead and attach your pockets at the side seam. So right now we are on step number 9 if you are following along to the instructions. If you notice, like I have said in almost every one of my tutorials, that I kind of don't go directly from step by step with the pattern because I have a way of sewing, but I'm trying to go in order if it makes sense, okay? So get 2 of your pockets for the front, the other 2 will be used for the back, and you will do it like you do for anytime you attach pockets. So you look for your notch. I have a notch right here and I have a notch on the other side. So with right sides together, you are going to pin your pockets to the side of your dress. So go ahead and pin at the notches, pin at the top, and pin at the bottom. So go ahead and pin your pockets to your side seams now. All right, so now that I have my pockets pinned to the side seam of the front, you're gonna do the same thing to the back, but going to the sewing machine and using 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, back stitch at the beginning and at the end, and then finish off your side seam of your pocket. After you finish off the side seam of your pocket, I'm gonna serge about 1/2 inch above and 1/2 inch below. Reason being is because you guys know that I sew my side seams together instead of separately. So I want to make sure that the edge of my pockets is already finished before I attach the pockets, the front to the back. So that's why I do that. All right. Now, after you've serged your pocket side seams, you're going to go ahead and understitch the front. So basically press your seam allowance towards your pocket, and then understitch at a fourth of an inch seam allowance only on your front pockets. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have my pockets sewn to my the front portion of my dress, I also pressed my seams, understitched it, and then finished off my pocket area. I also attached, I'm gonna go ahead and move my front out the way for a second. I also attached pockets to the back in the same manner that I did for the front. So the back is pattern piece number 5. So I'm gonna show you this as well. All right, so this is my back, and I attached the pockets to the side seam, finished off my side seam, and pressed it towards the pockets. The only difference is I did not understitch my back pockets, okay? Now, the next step that you're going to do is with right sides together, you're going to attach the front to the back at the side seams and pockets. So this is the back pattern piece facing up on the table. And I'm going to place my front on top. Now, one thing with the front, like I said, make sure you finish off this, the front band, this portion right here. Go ahead and serge that if you have not done so already, all right? To finish off your seam, you don't want that to go left undone, okay? All right, so with right sides together, you're going to pin your side seams of your dress, okay? So I'm just gonna do one side on camera, and you could do the other side yourself. So what you're going to do is basically match up your notches and your dots and make sure that your pocket is lined up as well, okay? So what I'm going to do is make sure that I match up these 2 notches right here. Match that up. And then you're going to pin at the top. Make sure the top seams are matching up as well. And then you're going to pin the length of your dress. So go ahead and pin your dress now. All right, so now that I pinned my side seams using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, you're going to back stitch at the beginning, come up to this dot, back stitch right here at the dot, break your threads, start at this second dot, back stitch at the beginning, and then sew all the way up to the top portion of your dress, making sure you back stitch at the end. After you sew that, you're going to sew around your pockets using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Once you are done sewing your side seams, leaving this opening right here where your pocket is open between the dots, back stitch at both dots, right? Leave this open, do not sew this portion by your pockets. After you do that, make sure you finish off your seam allowance and also around your pockets on both sides. All right, so go ahead and do that. But I wanna make one note. If you have not done so already, before you attach your side seams, make sure if you are doing the tucks, you have transferred that area on the front of your dress, okay? So make sure that you have transferred where your tucks are on the front and back of your dress. Now, I believe the tucks is just on the front of your dress, so make sure that you have marked where your tucks are on the front of your dress before you attach the side seams. So if you have already done that, go ahead and sew your side seam and finish them off now. All right, so now I have my front and back attached at the side seams and pockets. I went ahead and finished off my side seams and my pockets as well. So now what I'm going to do is turn it right side out. So just turn your dress right side out. And then, like I just told you, that you need to make sure, now what I'm going to do is press my seams towards the back, okay? So I'll do that in just a second when I get ready to form my tucks. Now, one thing I want to mention about the tucks if you are doing the tucks, okay? So if you grab your pattern piece, you probably cannot see this on mine, but I made a line across where my tucks are. So if you did not do that, grab your pattern piece. I am looking at the front of my dress. All right. So now I cut 4 inches off of my pattern. So I have lines right here that tells me where the 4 inches is. So I'm just going to go ahead and fold it up at 4 inches. And then I'm going to see where my fold line is for my tucks. So basically the fold line is right here where I marked this blue line. So what you're going to do is you're going to take this line, where's the fold line for your tuck, and you're going to go up. All right, so you should have a dot. So you're going to match it up to that dot that you have right here on the side seam. So you're going to take the fold line. I have a dot, which is the stitching line that I made. So you take it up to that stitching line. And what you're going to do is I would press it, okay? This is what it looks like. All right, so I would press it. Now make sure you're only doing 1 layer. So I would take this to the ironing board and do this for my tuck. Press it and then pin it and then stitch. I would say about 1/4 of an inch seam allowance in order to create your tuck. Now make sure you know that you're going all the way around your dress with the tuck, okay? So I have 2 that I need to do. And after you stitch your tuck across, you're going to press it down, okay? So I'm gonna show you what it looks like. Go ahead and take your line, if you made a line, put it up towards the stitching line, which for me, I made a dot, which is my stitching line, okay? All right. And then after I do that, I'm going to press it at my ironing station. And I'm also going to do the top one the same way. I'm just going to take this top one, match that up to the dot I created as well. After I stitch it, I'm going to take the tuck and press it down. So go to your ironing station, do that, stitch your tuck in place, press it down, and we'll continue. All right, so now that I have went ahead and done my tucks at the bottom, I want to make a correction from the instructions. So let me get the instructions for you. And if you look at number 13, it says to form tucks and dress on outside, which means the right side of your fabric, crease along fold lines, stitch along stitching line, and then press tucks down. Here's the thing. What I did in order to get my tucks to look correctly, I stitched on the wrong side. So I pressed up like it told me to do, and then I stitched on the wrong side, basically on the inside of the fabric. And then on the outside, I pressed it down. Now it looks like an actual tuck instead of some mumble jumble that they had you do. So I want to make the correction, and you can write this on your pattern instructions, that where it says on outside, put on inside or wrong side of fabric. Crease along the fold line, which you would still press up, right sides together, press up, but you want to pin and sew on the wrong side of your fabric, all right? That's in step number 13. All right, so now that we have done our tucks, another thing that I did was I pressed my seams towards the back of my garment, and I also inserted my belt loops. If you want to make belt loops, I will go ahead and link my belt loop tutorial for you in order to do the belt loops, okay? Now that I have done my belt loops, I have done my tucks, go ahead and move your dress out of the way and grab your sleeves, which is pattern piece number 7. So I'm not gonna do the sleeves on camera for you. I'm just gonna tell you exactly what you need to do because we have done sleeves before and there are so many tutorials on how to do sleeves, okay? Now, because this is a raglan sleeve, you would insert it the same way. Now, I am going to mark the wrong side of my pattern pieces like I do for everything I sew. I want to make sure that I am not sewing the wrong sides together instead of the right sides together, okay? So I went ahead and marked a number 7 on my pattern piece. I'm gonna move one out the way. And now in the pattern instructions, it tells you to basically sew your underarm seams, okay? We are going to sew our underarm seams together first with right sides together. You're going to pin at the notches that you have here, pin at the top, and then pin at the bottom. So go ahead and pin at the top, pin near your hem, and then pin along the seam allowance, the raw edge of your sleeves or the length of your sleeves. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have it pinned, my underarm seam of my sleeves pinned together using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, back stitch at the beginning and at the end, and sew using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Go ahead and do that now. After you sew your underarm sleeves, go ahead and finish off your sleeves at the bottom. And press after you finish off your sleeves. If you are not pressing your seams open, I am going to serge my seams together into one and press it towards the back. That's where the 2 notches are. After I do that, I'm going to create a 5/8 of an inch, a half an inch, I'm sorry, not 5/8, a half an inch seam allowance, press in 1/4 of the inch, and then press up that half an inch, okay, in order to case it. And then I'm going to stitch along the hemline, but leave about a 1 inch opening in order to insert my elastic. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have my elastic casing done at the hem, I have my underarm seams sewn together and finished off, casing done. I'm going to turn my sleeve right side out. Now, one thing I want to say is make sure you try your sleeve on and make sure that it fits all the way around. Now, for the elastic, what you needed to do is take your tape measure and measure all the way around your wrist. Once you do that, add 1 inch to that measurement and then cut a piece of elastic that sides, and then feed your elastic through your casing, okay? Now, go ahead and grab your dress top, whichever one that you made. Now, I have already inserted 1 sleeve into my dress, so I'm gonna show you how to do the other sleeve. So just make sure that you have your arm's eye or sleeve portion where you're gonna insert your sleeve. And what you're going to do is pin right sides together at the underarm seam. Now, one thing I want to mention is make sure that your seams are pressing the back of your dress. Now, this is the back portion of my dress, and this is the front portion where my front band is. So make sure your sleeve underarm seam is also pressed towards the back as well. So go ahead and pin your underarm seams as well. You're also going to make sure you are matching up the notches. So there's double notches right here at the back, pin there. And then you're going to also pin the front, which is that single notch. You're going to pin there, and then you're going to pin the length of your sleeve. So go ahead and pin all the way around your sleeve now. All right, so now that I have my sleeve pinned into my arm's eye or armhole area, remember this is a raglan sleeve. So what you're going to do is start at one corner or the top. You're gonna backstitch at the beginning and sew all the way around and backstitch at the end. You will be using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have my other sleeve sewn into my dress, I went ahead and finished off my seam allowance as well. So the next thing that you want to do is go ahead and create gathering stitches around your neck edge before you sew on your neck band, okay? So go ahead and create your gathering stitches. And what I did for my gathering stitch, I did the first stitch at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance all the way around. And all you're doing is gathering in between the two dots. So you have a dot right here. See if you can see that. And then you have another dot right here. You probably can't see it on mine, but I can. So just make sure that you can see it on your garment, okay? So you're going to gather in between those two dots. Now, what you're going to do is you're going to gather around your neck. So just pull up some gathers. And then it doesn't matter how much you pull because you're going to have to gather it onto your neckband, which is pattern piece number 8. But you could just pull up a little bit of gathers now and get it prepared in order to do the neckband. Now I'll pull up the rest of my gathers here shortly, but I'm going to move my dress out of the way for just 1 second. Don't put it off to the side too far though. All right, so what you're gonna do is go ahead and grab pattern piece number 8, which is your neckband. So you have your interface neckband, and then you also have your non-interface neckband, okay? So now on the neckband that's interface, what you're going to do is at the bottom, like I did, I created a basting stitch 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, and I pressed up that 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. So you're going to have some ease in there. So basically you want to make sure that you press that up. After you do that, what you're going to do is trim it down to 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. So go ahead and trim the neckband down to 3/8 of an inch seam allowance now. All right, so now that I trimmed my neckband facing, which is this one, down to 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, now with right sides together, you're going to pin your neckband facing onto your neckband, okay? So with right sides together, you're going to pin the upper edge, which is this inside edge, to your neckband now. So make sure you match up your dots and your raw edges and pin all the way around now. All right, so now that I have the neckband pin on the upper edge, what you're going to do is you're going to start right here at the dot. So you want to start right at the dot, which is right here, the very end. So you could also pin at your dot. So using 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, you're gonna back stitch at the beginning, so all the way around the upper portion of your neck edge, and back stitch at that dot that you have, all right? So go ahead and do that. Now, once you finish sewing your upper edge, you're going to turn it out and give it a press, and press the seam allowance towards your facing. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have my neckband completely turned, you know, after I sewed it using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, I pressed the seams towards the facing, the portion that was interfaced, and then I pressed it all the way around, okay? So it could make and break your project if you do not press your seams as instructed, okay? So now what you need to do is go ahead and grab your dress, and you're going to pin your neckband to your dress. But before I do that, I'm gonna go ahead and gather all the way around. So if you have not gathered, go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have my neck edge gathered, I'm going to kind of make sure that it's not bunched up, and I'm going to pin my neckband to my neck edge. Now you have a little frown at the bottom of your neckband. Make sure you are pinning that portion to your neck. Now I did pin that you have dots right here. So make sure these dots are matching up with the dots that you have on your neck edge, okay? So just make sure that you are pinning and don't have a lot of bunching up going on, and pin all the way around your neck edge, making sure that your dots match up as well. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have my neckband pinned onto my neck edge, now what I'm gonna do is go to the sewing machine and using 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. I believe the neckband was 3/8. Yes, so if you look right here, it says 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. However, that's not the portion that we are sewing. We are sewing this portion right here. So you're gonna use 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. So right here along this edge, you're gonna sew using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. You're gonna back stitch at the beginning. So you're gonna start right here at the edge, back stitch at the beginning, sew all the way across and back stitch at the end using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. After you do that, you're gonna trim down your seams and press your seams towards your band. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I have my neckband onto my neck edge, what I'm going to do is trim down the seams. So go ahead and trim down the seams. I'm gonna trim it down to about 1/4 of an inch, 3/8 of an inch, just to trim it down a little bit so I don't have a lot of bulk going on when I turn my neckband to the inside, okay? So just trim it down some now. All right, so now that I have my seam allowance trimmed down, what I'm going to do is go ahead and press your seam allowance up towards your neckband. And after you do that, you're going to stitch your neckband facing over your neck edge. So you're just going to basically just a little over that edge, you're going to pin. Now you have the option of either slip stitching, or you could do what I'm going to do, and that's going to be stitch in the ditch or top stitch. Reason being is because I'm going to edge stitch all the way around bottom and top on mine to give it a little bit of definition. So once again, just to tell you what you're going to do, you're going to press the neck edge seam up towards the neckband, which is this portion right here. And then you're going to take the finished edge of your neckband facing, that's the band that's interface, place it over your neck edge, just a little over. And then on the right side, you're going to pin in place, okay? Now, make sure that you have no bunching up going on your neckband, because it will make or break your garment, okay? So make sure that you are pinning all the way around. There's no wrinkles or anything. You're going to pin, and then you're going to sew as close to the edge as possible right here. Now, I'm going to sew the bottom and the top portion of mine. You do not have to do that. But you will do some edge stitching, which is right here at the top, which I think is in step number 28. Go ahead to your sewing machine and do that now. All right, so I went ahead and pressed my seams up towards the neckband. I started pinning around, and this is what it's looking like so far. Now, I did not pin all the way around for a reason, because I want to add my label. And I'm going to add my label to the back. So what you want to do is find, when you are doing your neckband, you want to find the center back of yours, okay? So I marked my center back with the little white chalk right here. And what I'm going to do is place my label down, pin, and then press up and folding it in. So that's what I'm going to do to mine. And I'm going to go ahead and make sure that I stitch my label on now before I pin the rest of my neckband in order for me to top stitch and edge stitch. So go ahead and do that, and then make sure you do your top stitching now. All right, so now that I finished my neckband, this is what it's looking like. I have my label in there as well, and the neckband is looking amazing. Now, one thing that I'm going to do, I just did the bottom portion, but I am thinking of going ahead and do the top portion all the way around too. Just a top stitch there as well. I'm thinking about that, doing that off camera, of course. So after you do your neckband, there's only one thing left for you to do, and that's to do your belt if you are doing a belt. So I'm going to move my dress out the way, and I'm going to grab pattern piece number 9, which is my belt. Now, I really do not need to walk you through how to do this belt section simply because I have done a belt before. But all it is basically with right sides together. You have notches right here. So you're going to pin at the notch. And then you're going to pin at the top and at the bottom. And then you're going to go to the sewing machine and using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, backstitch at the beginning and at the end, and press your seams open. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I sewn my belts together at the side seams using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, I pressed it open. And then what you're going to do, or now what you're going to do, is with right sides together, you're going to pin at the center back seams. Basically, it's the back seams. Pin there, and you're going to pin all the way across, but leave about a good 2-inch opening in order for you to turn right side out and giving it a good press. So basically what you're going to do is pin your center back. I'm going to leave these 2 pins right here, and I'm just going to basically pin right there as well. So I know where to start and stop, and I'm going to pin all the way down and then go to the sewing machine using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, backstitch at the beginning and at the end, and pull it out and give it a good press. Once you do that, you are all done with your dress. Well, there you have it. You just finished sewing the second dress as part of the dress series 2022. So don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Turn on the notification bell so you are notified every time I upload a new video. So I'll catch you in the next video. And as always, keep sewing.